Hi, dear all, welcome. Welcome to our three speakers, Ilaria Conti, Yeung, and Mari Spirito. So I am Aska. I am a project director at Thanks for Nothing. Thanks for Nothing is a nonprofit organization that was founded in 2017. We bring together artists, art world professionals, and NPOs in order to develop artistic and solidarity-driven projects with an impact on society. We believe in the power of artists to deepen the understanding we have of current social issues, and we want to amplify their voices through creating bridges with as many people as we can, but also by developing projects with organization that works in the fields of like human rights, access to education, or ecology, or organizations that develop new types of research using new kinds of protocols, and working with people from different kinds of fields. Part of our activity also consists in highlighting initiatives that we believe are socially committed. So that social commitment could be because they're more inclusive, or because they create bridges between the art world and many other fields, or because they question the perspectives we use when looking at culture and art. So it's in this frame that we've been commissioned by Asia Now, which is an Asian contemporary art fair that is taking place in Paris every year during FIAC week since 2014. Asia Now commissioned us to curate a series of panels that are dealing with the theme of art and social commitment. So in that frame, we invited speakers that wish to raise awareness among the general public on themes and current events that affect our societies, in order to give also the keys to new forms of social commitment. But that invitation was also about deepening the understanding of the cultures of different regions in Asia, to question the historical and geographical approaches, putting forward the curatorial practices and the social commitment of actors of the art world. So just to present the general program that we curated in this frame of this Asia Now and Thanks for Nothing platform. So there are three other panels, plus the one that I am currently introducing. The first one is about art and ecology. It's about nature in the frame of two different kinds of approach, and two kinds of approach that are dealt with in two exhibitions. One is about a Chinese Taoist concept of nature called Shun. And the other one is based on the Anna Tsing book, The Mushroom at the End of the World, on the possibility of life in capitalist ruins. So this is the first panel that we have curated. The second one is about Iranian female artists who use video to talk about their condition, but also to talk about the country and their perception of life, obviously. The third panel is about the crisis in Afghanistan. We have decided to invite several artists. Two of them we can't say the names of two of them yet because of security issues, obviously. But this panel about Afghanistan is an opportunity to also invite people from like the French art world professionals who helped Afghan artists to flee their country and to be invited by like museums or NPOs in France. And it will also be the opportunity to talk about this young generation of artists, especially as we have invited a curator who worked on a project called Carmora in the Museum of Mucem in Marseille, and who was about this young generation of artists after 2001. So the panel today, the panel that I'm introducing today, is about deepening this understanding that we have about Asia, as I was saying, but also about the multiple strategies and definitions of social practices in relation to artistic research that have been developed in Asia. So of course, for this topic, we immediately thought of Ilaria Conti. Ilaria is an independent curator who, among many projects, was the curator, was a research curator at the Centre Pompidou. And she also served as the associate curator on the Cosmopolis platform at the Centre Pompidou as well, that she will also tell us a little bit more about in a few minutes. So we invited Ilaria to help us curate this panel. Ilaria immediately thought of inviting two curators who will tell us about their social commitment in their practice and the innovative initiatives that they develop in those research-based curatorial practices, and how they work with artists and with the general public as well. So Mari Spirito is the executive director and curator of Protocinema, and she's based in Istanbul, in Turkey. And Yeung is an independent writer and curator. She's the founder of a nonprofit organization called Soundpocket as well, in Hong Kong. I will let Ilaria take it on, and I thank her again for helping us curating this panel, and I thank also Yeung and Mari Spirito to make themselves available in such short notice and to share their vision and projects with us today. Dear Ilaria, that's your turn.
Thank you very much, Aska, and thank you also to Thanks for Nothing and to Asia Now for this invitation. So I am also very glad to have Mary and Yeung with us today. And as you said, Aska, when I was invited to develop this program, I immediately thought of both of them because of your really critical understanding in your practice, the practice you've been cultivating over the years around the 4 pivotal points that we will be able to address during this talk, which some Aska already mentioned. So the question of social practices in relation to artistic research, and also their presence and development in the so-called Asian continent, and we'll get to it in a moment, but also their relation and presence in nonprofit work and curatorial work, and also their role in trans-regional collaborations, which is something that is very important and that you both have cultivated extensively throughout your practice. So we will address all of these topics through the lens of your respective curatorial work, your work in critical thinking, and also in institutional building. And I'm very excited because I keep saying, and I really believe that your practices have many elements in common. They share many elements in common, both in terms of professional methodology, but also, and I am very interested in that, and both of you know that, also in terms of personal ongoing commitment. So this is a very important sort of relation that I would love for us to discuss also as we go through all the amazing projects you've been developing. So I am very excited for you to share the same space of conversation, since from what I understood, it has never happened before. So I'm glad that we're able to make this connection today. And so without further ado, I guess I would like to start. I know Aska has done some very nice introductions, but I also am always very keen on starting a conversation by asking the invited speakers to introduce themselves in their own words. So Mary, perhaps would you like to go first?
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, thanks to Asia Now. Thanks for Nothing. This is super exciting. And yeah, my name is Mari Spirito, and I'm the executive director and founder, curator of Protocinema, which just turned 10 years old this year. And we're an ambulant, let's say, cross-cultural art organization. And our core of our organization is to commission artists to make site-aware installations in both New York, Istanbul, and other places. We do have an emerging curator series where once a year we invite a curator and make a show with us. It's a mentorship program. We have an annual screening tour, which goes to multiple venues around the world during the year. And we started a zine where we're publishing texts. And so we could talk more about that a little bit later. Maybe that's enough for now.
Thank you so much. Yeung.
Hi, everyone. resonating with all the words of thanks, but I also want to add thank you to all contributing factors, some visible, some invisible. It's nighttime, almost 10 p.m. here where I am. I'm in the northeastern part of Hong Kong, very close to the sea, very close to nature. I founded Soundpocket in 2008, but now it's a team of all girls, Vanessa, Mandy, and Claire. And we were just exchanging emails about our fundraiser, which I won't tell you about, but it's coming soon around Christmas. So we constantly have to think about money, but money is everywhere, but it's not everything.
Thank you so much. So then, since Yeung, also you mentioned where you are located at the moment, which I think is very interesting, but an important starting point somewhat for the talk was also, or something that we really wanted to include in what we will be discussing today, is to start with a critical reflection of the very notion of Asia, since sort of the framework of this talk is this fair dedicated to Asia. So we wanted to invite voices that somewhat bring forward a critical perspective on such idea, both in terms of geographical mapping, if we want to use that word, but also in terms of the somewhat highly multifaceted social, political, cultural identities and communities that this term embraces. Again, Mary is at one sort of in one point of the spectrum, and Yeung, you're in a very different point of that spectrum. So I would like to start by asking you, perhaps even as a provocation, about your very own understanding and also possible definitions, which might change, of course, over time and throughout your work and your path, possible definitions of Asia from the perspective of your work and also from the perspective of your specific locales.
Yeung, you want to take this one first?
Okay. Since I'm in Plover Cove, the district I'm in, the locale is called Plover Cove. I mean, okay, it's a challenging question. Let me start from a small point. The recent curation, the co-curation I did, the Listening Biennale, I was connecting with an artist based in Bangkok in Thailand. And I was telling her in this public dialogue that, oh, I've never before felt so Asian now. And this precisely came from the movement, the political movement, pro-democracy movement in 2019. And the reason why I had that thought was there was a Reuters journalist who was a friend and we were chatting, and she was reporting on the movement, and she said, you know, the Hong Kong police, like they, at least at the time, were not using real bullets. But if you are in other parts of like Southeast Asia, they wouldn't wait to be firing real bullets. But that was a specific time frame. Things change very fast. But that sort of comment from this friend I have, also a journalist, made me reflect on, indeed, I felt closer, maybe for the wrong reason, to my neighbors. And I realized also my ignorance of what's happening in different parts of where people live, not just the countries, but really locales. So it made me more curious, but it made me feel not alone. So that's a small point. I mean, like an acupuncture point. I question the idea of Asia, though, because to me, it's better that it remains an unresolved question, that we keep questioning the apparent unity of Asia and the apparent sort of economic alliance or pact that it presents itself in. There are all sorts of critiques to be launched about it. I'm no expert at all, but I'm just, in general, against reductionist or overly simplistic ways of talking about anything. And then the larger point, I guess, I want to make is that I have been recently writing about an artist practice, an artist based in Hong Kong, and I have come across this book by Caroline Turner and Jen Webb. It's called Art and Human Rights, Contemporary Asian Contexts. published in 2016. And there, in very beginning chapter, they mention how the concept of Asia was developed outside of Asia, notably by the ancient Greeks. So it's nice to know there's an ancient sort of origin, but and it's also nice to know that cultures crossed way earlier than we can imagine, or we would like to imagine. I don't know how anyone would like to put it, but to me, again, coming back to the first point, I feel that for me it's more exciting that what Asia is still to be found out, and that I really appreciate this space and time for us to be talking about it. Your turn, Marie.
Thanks. And of course, yeah, we all want to avoid generalizations, but I think there is something about when these terms get moved around Latin America, Asia, so forth, that it only really works the further away you get from that place. Like there's a relational, I think, between the space, like when you're in, like maybe say the United States and you talk about Asia, it has a certain like use, but if you're in Istanbul, or even if you're in Taiwan and you say Asia, that when you, this closer you get, the more you need to be more precise, and it changes how the generalization is then utilized. So here, of course, people every day say, I'm going to the Asian side. You want to meet me on the European side? When are you gonna? We go back and forth all the time, but we don't think of so much of it really being connected to something so much bigger. It's just about how it is in our immediate surroundings. So we say it a lot, but it doesn't feel like it's really touching on something else. But then when you have a situation, a cultural misunderstanding, and someone says, but this is the way that it is in the East, Mary, you must understand. It's like, well, which part of the East? What we have to get specific. So I think that that's part of the dynamics of cross-cultural work, that we want to bridge understanding, but only the way to get there is through lots of tiers of misunderstanding. So I think this term Asia serves that purpose quite well.
Thank you to both of you. And so, as I mentioned before, I believe you both have very, very insightful understandings of social practices and also their relation to contemporary art. And it is highly reflected in the work and institutions you have developed. And so I would like to ask you both about your respective organizations. Mary, as you mentioned before, 10 years ago, so congratulations. You founded Protocinema in Istanbul, but with this very international approach. And Yeung, you created Soundpocket in Hong Kong in 2008. So what I find interesting is that you both felt the need to develop your own organizations. And also over time, you have developed approaches that are in close dialogue with social political issues and also with socially engaged artistic practices. So this is one element. The other very interesting overlap, it's from my perspective, is that you created two organizations that are centered, or at least in their initial intention, were centered. And of course, things expand and change over time, but they were centered on mediums that can be seen somewhat as off-center. And again, this is a provocation again, if you want. Off-center compared to the field of contemporary art, right? For you, Mary, cinema, and for Yeung, sound. So what I want to ask you is if you could tell us more about, first, the urgencies, the reasons that led to the creation of Protocinema and Soundpocket, and also why you decided to start somewhat these organizations through the lens of a specific medium, but also how you've been working through this specific elements with socially engaged practices through your respective organizations. So if you can tell us a little bit about the origin and the thinking through this medium-based approach, and now it has evolved over time, unfolded over time in relation also to certain socially engaged practices, or in any case, social urgencies around you. And maybe, I don't know who wants to go first.
Do you want me to start this one? Okay, we'll go back and forth like a ski lift. My turn, your turn. All right, so this is really interesting because As you also know, Protocinema is an art organization, a nonprofit art organization, and the name Protocinema is a little bit of a plot twist, where we do show lots of moving image work, lots of film and video, because moving image is a vernacular of our time and we love it. But also it's the medium, if we're going to say we're medium centric, the medium is cognition. And in the same way related to film where, L'Amour brothers, like the train in the film is coming towards, and that moment in someone's brain when they jump out of their chair to get away from the moving train, like that's the medium. And so when I was starting Protocinema, and I wanted a name that embodied this motion of moving around and being in different places, but I wanted to be really embedded in it. I saw Werner Herzog's film, The Cave of Forgotten Dreams, about the 30,000-year-old cave paintings in France. And he asks, why are there beasts the cavemen drew with 8 legs instead of 4 legs? And then he goes on to answer his own question, saying that that's man's attempt to represent motion. Maybe this is man's first attempt to make for proto-cinema. So I thought that the way that an idea comes out of your head, gets represented, and then it goes into someone else's head, and this transference of ideas is fascinating. And also on a personal issue, which we talked about, Ilaria, in another talk, how we come to understandings, how it relates to our actions and our environment, our context, and what those outcomes are. I would even go as far as to say, like, thought reform, behavior modification, and belief systems, how we come to those and what that affects. That's also maybe one of the main driving forces. And so all these things like lead together to have it be a little bit of a trick name, but that meant that it opened up the doors for lots of other things. And now we're doing, proto-zine and proto this and proto that. And so it's a good question. I think that's maybe enough on that on my end.
I may have questions for you later, Marie. It's intriguing. The representation of movement. I was going to say in relation to Asia that, okay, it's a geographical and territorial concept, but I mean, what about the sea? Okay, we have sort of lines drawn by people to separate the seas, but they resist. They don't even have to resist. They are the way they are. And so we can't really talk about the sea in those terms. And I see actually quite a lot of artists in this region, geographically, working a lot on not even crossing the sea, but linking up the shores. So I think that's inspiring. But okay, in response to Ilaria's question, there are maybe 2 ways in, like in terms of Hong Kong first, when I founded Soundpocket in 2008, we didn't have M+, we didn't have the large institutions that most Western developed countries do. We do have Museum of Art, but a lot of us in the community question whether it is an art museum for contemporary art. So for decades, the Hong Kong scene had been driven by artists and non-profit groups, mostly artist-driven. So the vibrancy actually came from artistic practices. Without curators, artists would be curators. So there are many hats that artists wear. So that's sort of the general environment. Things, again, have been changing, and they will change very soon, as we all know. The institutions are coming quickly, and some might say aggressively, but others might say in a very good way, because we have been needing those for a very long time. So there have been still debates about it, and then I think because of that, there is solidarity more and more within the art community, that people feel that there, as Aska said in the introduction, we believe that art is powerful, then artists can do things that other people cannot do. So that's a general Hong Kong environment. For sound, I guess we approach, like when I founded Soundpocket, it's not so much sound as a medium, but more listening as a human activity, a capacity that we all have. Even those who are, challenged in their hearing, there would be other modes of listening through our bodies, our skin, our bones. So listening isn't just localized in the ears. So I was concerned about two things: the public culture of listening. It was getting narrower and narrower, like radio, okay, pop songs and financial news and all the same, getting monolithic. And in the art world, I see artists dealing with sound as a medium in video and maybe other practices, installation and all that, but there is a lack of interpretation, which it's maybe a more basic question about whether we have the vocabulary or the language to talk about listening and sound. So I encountered not a lot, because there are not a lot of artists who trust sound as a medium or who are curious about listening, but quite a few who are very committed and curious in this new area. And so founding an organization to deal with something that is so uncertain, it's a bit crazy, but that's also the fun part, I guess, not really knowing what we were actually doing. But now we do. That's what I have so far.
Can I ask about this shift, that there's talk about a shift from Hong Kong to Seoul? Is that something that you feel on the ground in Hong Kong? Is that really happening, or is it just people are saying it because of the fair in Seoul right now?
The ship or the shift?
Like that the center, Hong Kong's not a center anymore, that Seoul is kind of becoming the new center because of the politics in Hong Kong. Is that really happening, or is it just because people are saying it because the fair is going on right now?
I don't know about the fair. You know, if I were to describe the Hong Kong art scene as I did just now, there had been no center. It's all sort of dissipated and distributed, and everyone just picks something up. It's very much like a pop-up that people celebrate, but they are pop-ups in a very meaningful way. Like they need to pop up like sprouts in nature, like flowers that do bloom. But I mean, can we, as you said, Marie, can we not take turns to be centers? And do centers have to be big anyway? And do they have to claim the universal anyway, right? We could all be centers anytime when we're ready. When we're ready, it comes.
That's beautiful. Yeah, maybe the centers have to also be mobile. They don't need to be permanent centers. They can be shifting centers. Sorry, Ilaria, we went off track.
No, I'm very happy, and actually wanted to ask Yeung whether, because you mentioned you had a question for Mary, but I wasn't sure whether you asked Mary your question. So this might have been a good moment, Yeung, if you want to just interject. Then we will move on to the next question that I have for you. But for now, I think it's good to address what springs up as it comes up.
Sure, thank you. It's about movement, because when you mention Herzog, I'm just thinking, because I teach also at the university, and there are those of us who were trained in the humanities, and we have a lot of colleagues who are trained in the modern sciences, and we're trying to forge conversations, and it's a mess. It's exciting, adventurous, but it's also like a lot of work. So I'm just thinking in terms of how artists have been representing motion. And it's an exciting idea for me, because as a writer, like when I go into an exhibition or trying to talk about an artist's practice, I always think of how they move or how they see things move, literally and also metaphorically. So I don't know much about cinema and moving images, but I'm just wondering, in your experience, Marie, can you share more with us how you sort of curate, maybe, should I put it this way, curate movement or curate artists?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because it's not so much that the work is about movement, but it's about that the organization is moving. And but I did see a video recently about, I mean, we all know that movement itself is a kind of really important aspect of our physical existence. And when it's contained, like being in prison, incarcerated, like it really damages your well-being. And that not being able to move, like we have a right to be rooted and in a place, and we have a right to have freedom of movement. Like both these things are equally essential. So I think that in that there's something. And for me, the whole thing about site aware was that you're aware of context, but the work could go somewhere else. It's not like site specific where it could only exist in this one neighborhood or mountain or something. It can go somewhere else, but then it will change when it goes somewhere else. And so if you think about social practices, it's the intersection of the context and then the action in the context. And that's what looks like you're doing anyway. And if you're engaging in the context, which is the people in it, then you're going to have this kind of thing going on. I have a little tiny anecdote of something that just came up recently, where I have a smart young person working for us who's, against urban, gentrification, eco, issues and so forth. And there is a practice in Turkey where large companies will have the employees pay for things out of their pocket. And then at the end of the month, they pay them back. And I said, I refuse this. You come to me, we discuss how much things are, I'll give you the cash, and then you bring me the receipts. And she resisted to the point where I had to ask her multiple times. And then she got upset that it's not the way it's done here. We've always done it this way. And I was like, but it's exploitation. And it's also a mess of my financial books. But it was interesting that we just keep doing things the way we normally do them. And something that seems so simple, it's actually like a labor issue. Why should anyone put out money in it and get paid back for that, like on the behalf of a company? It doesn't make sense. But she was fighting to be oppressed, even though a lot of her other activity is about, fighting against things that are oppressing. So I don't know, I think this is small things. And again, the how we do it is just as important as what we're doing thing.
Thank you so much. So you mentioned some important things in your last answer. You mentioned freedom of movement. And the question, before moving on to talk also about your other projects, one thing that I wanted to flag, which has emerged somewhat in a lateral way already, is that both of you work with more than in, I must say, political surroundings, political locales that are characterized by specific tensions. And I would say that this is true now more than ever. Yeung, of course, you mentioned this already in the context of Hong Kong, right, which has been subject to ever-growing repressive politics in its relationship with China, but also Mary in the context of Turkey, which is not an easy context, I would say, right, with a figure that has been at the top of the national political power for almost 20 years, and it's a very problematic figure. So because we've been talking about, as Mary's saying also, how one does things is more important than what one does. And so the content is important, but processes are important. And we've been talking about socially engaged practices, but it's important to also understand where you're developing these kind of practices. So in light of all of this, I wanted to ask you how you navigate such contexts through your work, through your respective organizations, and what does it mean to nourish socially engaged practices, socially engaged, even attitudes, as Mary was describing before, right? Just a way of doing things, not just projects per se, but socially engaged practices in these political contexts. How do you navigate the surrounding elements around you?
It's my turn, right, to be the center. Thank you for the question. I've been thinking a lot about how I may be responding in a different way from, like 3 months ago when I was speaking in public. And then I realized, not really, there's not much difference. So a short answer to that question would be, we just keep doing what we believe in. So there actually no change. Actually, we just keep, and what have we been doing? We have been supporting artists. That is our main business. Our main business is not to do exhibitions or not to do productions, but to support artists, their aspirations and their needs. And so we have been building learning communities, not just producing events. We do produce events, but that's sort of secondary. If it comes from the needs of artists, we support them doing that. But we build learning communities. So one of the main programs we have had is what we call the artist support program. It's very direct and explicit. So it's a 10-month sort of support program where we give artists a stipend. We get this money from the Arts Development Council. So it's public money, taxpayers' money. So they get a stipend every month, and then they get 1 month of overseas residency, which is the point that Maria was making. We are very much into artist mobility as well, in and out. So this is a very challenging time to keep that going. And we are trying to negotiate that specifically because recently we were told that our funding is cut on that part. So which is why I mentioned money in the beginning. It's all everywhere. We always have to think about it, but it's not everything. So that's one sort of response to that. And the other, I guess, is our attention is focused mostly on the quality of our relations. So I really like Aska's term, like social commitments. Like to be caring for others is really a commitment. It's not about, look, I know this is a principle of caring, but it's not enough to know. It's important to just actualize it. So I guess for us, by quality of relations, we think of artist life as communal, that maybe some of them don't like to socialize. They want to hide in the studio and they're a bit nerdy, but then they are also very aware, a lot of them, of what's happening around the world and how the world is affecting them, and how they might or might not want to represent that in their practices or their works. And so if we look just at what they display in public as a sort of complete work, we miss a lot. So in order not to waste that big part of their lives, I guess we try to sort of foreground those in a way that they're comfortable with. So by that, I mean, for instance, if we curate like festival that we did 5 editions of a listening festival, we will build a small young artist community around an artist we have commissioned to the festival who is more established. And then they would connect as a little learning community. And the younger artists will be taking the maybe overseas artists to unlikely places in Hong Kong to eat strange stuff and to know trees that are grown locally and to watch sunrise and, you know, things like that, things that you won't see in an art gallery. So it's really about small things, as Marie said, parochial even, but I think we might want to rescue the term parochialism from that which is too negative.
Let's bring it back. Let's totally bring back that term and give it a good spin. I think also to kind of continue what you were saying, that there is always a line that's moving, and we just stay aware and just stay on the other side of the line to do what we can do. And let's be frank, the situation is, yeah, severe in Turkey, but also the United States. Things are very upset, and there's a lot of moving parts over there, and there's a lot of, yeah. So I would say that even after Gezi Park, the things didn't get better, they got worse. And so I have my concerns about the United States, how to support that, while it's super important that we have these chances to speak out as groups, but it's also how do we kind of get ready for what follows, because it's not always better than it was before. But that said, then another reason that's good to be small is that we're nimble and we can move between the raindrops, and we can do what we can do. So, obviously during the pandemic, we were able to do little interventions in existing spaces that were open during this, and like big institutions couldn't do that. Or because we have our audience, we can maybe show work that might be a little bit more, if it was shown in a big museum, they would not be able to do it, but we're able to do it. So I think, just always keeping up with the moving tide is how we survive. So.
Can I quickly add to that? I love that idea that we describe ourselves as a microbe. So I think microbes work really well, like digesting things and upcycling things, and in a quiet sort of way, in secrecy. So, but to put it in a more formal, serious language, and also to respond to Ilaria's question in the beginning, we are seeing deliberate and pretty aggressive policy of atomization in our society. So it's everywhere in the news that civil organizations that have been running for decades have to disband. So, but I do not think our civil society is gone. I think it's richer than ever because it's in the microbian level.
That's a perfect metaphor. I love it. It's great.
Thank you to both of you. And so I'm very glad to hear all of this because it reinforces my thoughts about how somewhat there's a strong overlap between your respective practices. And so continuing on that parallelism somewhat, I wanted to also talk about your cross-regional work. Because you've been working very much in this direction. You've mentioned this already. And I wanted to ask you more specifically about two recent projects that you have developed, which, I mean, projects that you've been developing for some time, but then there's two recent iterations of them that I would love to ask you about. So in the case of Mariam, Protocinema is a project titled A Few in Many Places, and you've recently had a series of projects as part of this bigger umbrella. And for Yeung, you mentioned it briefly before, is the 2021 Listening Biennial. So I would just ask you if you could guide us through these projects, discuss their multi-site and also their collaborative approach. I guess it's Mary's turn, yes?
Yeah. Okay, great. So thanks. I love to talk about this project. Few in Many Places was born in 2020 and then in 5 cities, and we did it again in 2021 in 6 cities. And the impulse initially was that there was this huge, retreat online, or a huge rush to be present online. And while we love the being globally interconnected and find it extremely important, we also wanted to stay a little bit in real life, keep a foot in, our local communities and to keep it engaging, even if it was only 3 or 4 people at a time, because we do value the person-to-person aspects enormously. So that was what we did. We invited artists to do interventions in somewhere in their local community and gave them funding for a fee, for the materials, low materials for the commission, and to have somebody next to them, get a friend or a colleague or a writer or a curator, somebody. It doesn't have to be official. And we did this, and we interconnected them through Protozine with texts from different places, writing from far away about these scenes, and it was really nice. And then we did it again in 2021, and we invited Abidjan Toto, who's a really dynamic, interesting thinker, to co-curate it with us, which was great because then also he brought in a lot of his relationships in Southeast Asia, and Korea was a very nice one, is from Seoul. And so that was really dynamic because then all of a sudden we had more people and that was more collaborations. This one was actually about how do we break cycles of violence and working collectively as a kind of counterbalance. But it was like, it got much bigger, much faster. And so you have like a collective, like Welcome to Ogasawara in Seoul, and there's like 8 people in this collective. And so we can't talk to everybody, but they did an amazing, innovative project, which was actually about the fact that the internet is not open and free to all. It has just as many boundaries as the physical real world. And they use the sea and pirating as metaphors because we also know the sea does have boundaries. And so they made physical QR codes that went into a shopping mall, and you had to physically go there to use your phone to get in it. You couldn't get the QR codes any other way. But then once you went there at different times of day and at different spots in the mall, you would get access to different online artworks, which is pretty incredible. And then we also put those QR codes, of course, in other cities to make it available to more audience. The idea too is a longing for plurality, to have multiple different kinds of voices and different perspectives. And what happened was the process of working on it, of course, when you're talking to the different people, this one was Seoul, Bangkok, Istanbul, New York, Puerto Rico, and Guatemala City. All the situations are very different from each other. But then every week or 2 weeks, they're also changing within themselves. There's, different political crises, different weather crises, different COVID crises. So we're always moving things around. And any attempt to standardize was just like dissolved. It was not possible. For example, we had like, let's open on this date. Well, we can't open because of, all these different reasons. So we had things that were kind of opening and closing at different times. And so I love this idea that it's not an exhibition that's contained by time with a beginning date and an end date. And for example, Michelle Lopez did an audio piece in Philadelphia in the 2021 version. And we had that out on the streets with kids on bikes called Catch Me If You Can, Catch Me in Traffic. And these kids are like, doing wheelies in the streets and playing her audio piece. And, but she really wanted to do it around the Liberty Bell. But because of the inauguration, because of the Black Lives Matter, because of all these other things that were going on, we did it again, and we didn't do it until finally in 2021. So these kings have these longer spans. And maybe that's enough for now. But it was really a longing for, we want to get more deep in our own community, but we also really wanted to not get into these silos of, blocked travel and all these other, and being stuck only online, to figure out a way to stay connected. And I think that is something that we could expand on more, and maybe need to expand on more.
I just, Marie, I just have because I read a bit about this project, and I was wondering, do you know why it's called Welcome to Ogasawara? Because like Ogasawara is the name of that like paradise kind of island, which is like you have to take a boat to go there. And I was wondering if you knew the reason why it was called this way, or.
Well, I know that that collective uses a lot of the pirate narratives, and they love that it's like a perfect looking pirate, but I'm sure there's other complex layers underneath it. So we should talk to Miji Lee and get her in here one day.
Yes, we should. We will.
I love that.
I'm thinking of a pirate legend that we have in one of the islands of Hong Kong, but I shouldn't go there because I don't know enough. I want to resonate with what Marie said about the rhythm and the dynamic of things opening and closing at different times. I guess the Listening Biennale that I co-curated with Brandon, Israel, and Buddha. We are in different time zones, and we have had only 3 Zoom meetings. I've never met Buddha in Israel except on Zoom. Brandon I knew from before because he came to Hong Kong on some other occasions. But I guess, the programs, anyone could just go to the website, and there are archives, and there is still an artist list. So you can get a sense of what happened. But from my more personal sort of experience, I guess, as co-curator, first of all, I feel really lucky to have been involved, and that we have already committed, the 4 of us, in terms of the next edition and how to structure this in a more permanent way. So this first edition, I guess, is really about experimenting, but based on a lot of trust. It's amazing to me that not that we know each other personally so much, but that maybe we know each other's work somehow. And through Brandon's initiation, bringing us together, that gesture of, gathering relevant contributing factors, that's a beautiful gesture that he first initiated. And I think at this time, during the pandemic, and that Marie also mentioned about how, important mobility is, and sometimes we're constrained, coerced into it. And so this, but then to resolve it, it takes maybe just a tiny step forward from all of us, that if we would care to just make this small gesture of inviting someone, then everything could become different. This is a very sort of big imprint that had come to me because of the Listening Biennale. And besides trust and experiment, I think it's also for me, what we organize, okay, to be more concrete, like in Hong Kong, for instance, I curated a number of listening situations, I call. It's in my piece of writing on the website. And by that, I mean, we don't actually know what might happen. Anything can happen. There would be performance artists, there are dialogues with artists. And so we keep it spontaneous, just as Ilaria has curated this conversation. And one specific example I want to mention is Wantani Siri, the Bangkok-based artist. We talked about whether she wanted to show her work in Berlin, which is one site for the Biennale, but there are multiple sites really in Hong Kong, in multiple cities in Mexico, and also other parts of Europe, and in Taiwan, also in Taipei. So I was asking Wantani, would you like your video work to be shown in Berlin in the gallery? And she said, you know, it would be nice, but the point of showing my work is that I would be present and then making connections with other human beings. And so there's no point if I just send my video work, you know, as data and that, you know, it will be professionally sort of taken care of. So we decided then, because of the pandemic situation, that we will actually come into a conversation. So the conversation took place in Hong Kong. It's an artist studio turned artist hub. It's called 1983. So again, you can find it on the website. And it's very vibrant and has organized hundreds of events already. And that night, we talked for like 5 hours. And there were maybe 10 of us in the group, and with Wantani in Bangkok and us in Hong Kong. We shared things about democratic politics, and she showed videos she took on the streets about, you know, police standoffs with the people. And so I guess that's what we needed the most then, and maybe now and forever as well, just to be with each other and making space for each other. And this is what I mean by, I guess, soundpocket's principle as well, that, you know, there is this very strong, I guess, school of thought portraying the artist as the loner and, you know, individualist, even solitary figure. I guess there is that in all of us, but then there's also this longing to connect in different ways. So I guess we fill in that little gap with a micro sort of body. Sorry, it's a little bit far-fetched. Thank you.
I would say not at all. And it's why I was so excited to have both of you, as I was saying, because you're so interested in the political as you are in the relational and in the personal somewhat. And I think that is the level of investment that really brings forward serious and real political work. And so we're, I think, almost at the end of our time together, but I wanted to ask you, of course, what you're working on right now, and also what kind of future you see for your respective organizations, how you're imagining the future of your respective organizations. And also, since we've been talking so much about socially engaged practices, also your opinion in regard to how they are transforming. You've touched upon this briefly before, but how they are transforming and how they're doing so also in the Asian context and beyond, and somewhat what are some of these new urgencies that you're seeing emerging from the context, and also how they can be addressed through your work, but also beyond, I guess, your respective organizations.
Is it my turn?
I think so, yeah. It's your turn again.
Okay, and then change. This is a really, I think, important question for us. One, artist mobility, I mentioned already, so that's one of the urgencies we're working on it on an everyday basis. The second one is translation. So, I mean, translation as in between languages, but also as in trying to communicate with each other in a way that is parochial, that we translate the details. And that's really important because art, from reflecting on what happened in the past 2 years, is coming out strong and shining. and more and more. And I'm very moved by how artists are committed to keep sort of speaking out and doing what they can do. And so the job for, I guess, people like me who knows nothing but to write is to articulate what they're doing. And it's not so easy because it takes language translation and of course cultural translation that Marie mentioned. And which takes me to this other thing that I'd like to maybe quote from, because I've been writing again about an artist's practice, which is quite political in the sense of his sort of disidentification with the figure of the nation. So this is Alex Danshev. He's written a piece called Witnessing, and it's collected in a book called The Global, Visual Global Politics. I'm sorry, I might have said it, but it's edited by Bleicher. But I just want to say that in Danshev's piece on witnessing, I found it very moving that he talks of artists as moral witnesses. So I want to read a few lines from Danshev, Witnessing. So quoting, actually, Avishai Margalit. Witnessing may not change the world, but having that conversation marks it, tempers it, and sometimes rubs it red raw. This is Danshev's words. The act of witnessing is not a neutral act. It does not leave things as the witness finds them. It does not spare feelings. The witness spares nothing and nobody, not even the witness. That is the idea, to prick the conscience, to lodge in the memory, or stick in the throat. In this sense, the witness is more akin to an agitator than a bystander, but also more purposive, more principled, more pure. If the bystander is a deeply compromised figure, the witness is a profoundly elevated one. Put differently, the witness is a historical agent with a moral purpose and a militant faith. In Avishai Margalit's words, I'm quoting her Avishai, that in another place or another time there exists or will exist a moral community that will listen to their testimony, unquote. I cannot say that myself or soundpocket could rise up to that point, but I see a lot around us who have already done that, and I aspire to that, and I have you as our witness. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that you're a writer, and I've seen you speak before and read beautiful things. So I gave it some thought, and I thought I should also read something. This super classic Krishnamurti from Freedom from the Known, sorry. And it kind of relates to kind of where we're in this turbulent time right now. And so beginning quote, you may say, I can't do anything about it, or how can I influence the world? I think you can tremendously influence the world if you yourself are not violent, if you lead actually every day a peaceful life, a life which is not competitive, ambitious, envious, a life which does not create enmity, small fires can become a blaze.
I have that book, Marie, and more from Krishnamurti. We should run a reading group together one day. Why not?
I would love that, because I'm really thinking a lot about like you know, Zoom, I think, is good one-on-one, but group Zooms are a disaster. And, you know, when you do these long distance collaborations, you're only talking to the artist and the curator, and the communities don't get to talk to the communities. And I'm trying to figure out, I'm trying to torque this whole thing somehow, and like just each senators forward to more engagement, because I think the urgency is this siloification and this not moving, because even if we can get visas and all this stuff, like I don't want to fly the way we used to fly. So I say yes.
I will be the first to sign up. You know that, right? I have no words to thank you, both of you, for what is always your incredible generosity, humanity, empathy. These are all incredibly precious things. So thank you for putting them out there in public in a way. I am very grateful to both of you for the wonderful, wonderful professional also example that you set for people who are working in this field. So I really hope that this conversation will go long and far into the world to really show how this work can be done, right? With this approach of owing and not owning. No, this is not me. This is a wonderful scholar, Rolando Vázquez, but it's really what I see in your work and in you every time I have the privilege to chat with you and to check in with you and to speak with you. So thank you very much. And I don't think we can end on a better note or a higher note or any other kind of note. This is it, as far as I'm concerned. So thank you so very much again.
Thank you so much for this wonderful, moving moment. Also, I was very, I feel very grateful to have witnessed it, especially to be the first to witness it, because this is a pre-recorded conversation. So yeah, thank you so much. I had so many things that I wanted to talk to you about, but as Ilaria was saying, I think we should reflect on what just happened. And I was very moved by your readings, and let's just end this conversation by saying that we can all be centers when we're ready, as Yeung was saying. Yeah, and just keep as you were saying also, those some kinds of notions or concepts, as when you were talking about Asia, you were saying that it's good that they remain unresolved also, but that it's important to just keep that space and time where we discuss it. And I think that's something that we managed to do, that you managed to do very beautifully today. Thank you so much for your generosity. Thank you so much for those amazing moments, and can't wait for the if I can be part of the reading group as well, please just send me an invite. And thank you so much to all of you. Thank you.